Welcome to Rauta's original Finnish black metal history series. This time we'll have another set of 3 different bands. These bands don't have much in common except, in my opinion, they're all good quality. They have very different history, but all of them share, at least in a way, one thing in common. Lots of lineup changes, which is obviously not very uncommon when you're talking about some underground black metal. Now, as this series is all about the 90s, all of these bands were obviously founded in 90s. However, 2 of these were a little bit earlier on, not exactly as early as, say, bands like Beherit Archcoat in Belnazarine, but not too far from that either. So we'll go to 1992 first, and then moving on. But one band at a time, so let's start with the one that got their stuff out the earliest of this trio anyway. So let's welcome True Black Dawn, or Black Dawn how it was back in the days. As people might already know, there was some legal issues with some American band, which is also mentioned here in Metal Archive site, meaning that the Black Dawn band had to change their name to True Black Dawn later on, because these American ones, it seems, were bigger, had more muscle in terms of legal stuff, and as such, it led to these changes. No matter if the Finnish one was earlier there, this is how the world revolves. But enough of that. Let's move back to early 90s. Started under a different name in 1992 and then changed their name to 1993. Black Dawn was one of the band from the what you would call basically west coast of Finnish black metal scene. That is also place for other bands such as And Oceans and Nokian Crescent, etc. And obviously this band really had some similar, or say overlapping members. So we will go for this past members list. You will see, for example, there's this one guy who also played in And Oceans and Throes of Dawn, roughly the same scene. Then there was this guy who played still in Rauta Sound, is the main guitarist. And if you go for the current lineup, you will see the Wrath, the vocalist, in kind of a face, the front of the band. Also, was the vocalist of Enochian Crescent. And obviously there are some other overlapping things, but mostly I would say the thing with the vocalist and some ex-members were there really kind of a connection to this Vaasa West Coast scene. And Vaasa is not literally just a city, but, the outskirts as well. So there was this kind of a Finno-Swedish scene in a way, where things would really be presenting the Swedish-speaking people as well as Finnish-speaking people on the West Coast of Finland, and they really had their own scene back in the 90s. Now a lot of these people have moved away from this place, so people are more scattered as what it was back in the days, but still that was a scene for sure. But this is not about the scene, obviously, this is about this particular band. So True Black Dawn started early 90s, very quickly made the first demo, and then the second one already in the early to mid 90s. It took, much like other bands as well, a few years before they made their first album, Blood for Satan. And what a fierce album that is. It lasts only for merely some 30 minutes plus, but this album is very fierce and in my opinion still is very good album. Very strong, fast tempo, aggressive and all that stuff. So you might be thinking a little bit, but not exactly the kind of stuff that Marduk, for instance, did, with the album like Panzer Division Marduk and the like. So very compact, 30 minutes, satanic black metal, very fast, aggressive and all that stuff. And while they maintaining still the certain level of darkness, obviously. And if you look at the lineup, this is curious if we're talking about the drummer, because he also had, like I mentioned, his foot in other bands like Enochian Crescent and Oceans. And then there was this interesting collaboration called O, which had these guys from different bands making the stuff together. And like I mentioned, for example, the guitarist Samples guy's gone, or Mika, he's mostly known for the Rauta Sound guitar player. So basically shifting from one aggressive fast tempo black metal to grind might sound a little quite of a step ideologically, but if you think of musically, not that much. Not to disregard the other people who were part of the band. Nowadays, the lineup is a little bit different, obviously, because the band has changed so many times. So if you look at this stuff nowadays, you will see, for example, Siphon, who also was part of And Oceans, for a while, but mostly known for his work with Gorgon Ruse and Baptism these days, I guess. Not just live member, as it mentioned here, but it is what it is. And he's part of other, bands too, and also writing songs for Black Dome. So things have changed. You might also know that it has, drummer from Horna, and then again taking the bass role in Horna, and then you have DG from Trollheims Grott, another band which I'm talking about here, and all that stuff. So it's a very connected band in so many ways. You have a lot of people who are various bands in the scene, not just black metal scene at all. For example, Pyruhansky here from PH, and this is also having the And Oceans and Trollheims Grott connection, which is curious because these bands were very, very in different places geographically in Finland and Finnish scene back in the 90s. Nowadays things are different and people are indeed more around capital area and all. But like I said, things have changed. But talking about the music, there was a big step, 15 years from the debut album to 2016, Come the Colorless Dawn. And what a sequel it was. In my opinion, these two albums after the debut, which is already strong, are even better. The style is not so much anymore so aggressive, but it's even more darker. And now you have more lengthier songs, as well as the overall album is, longer. And I think these are some of the peak black metal albums from Finland, both of Thick Circling Shadows as well as the second album are the kind of stuff that, in my opinion, define Finnish black metal in a different but better way than your typical Horna, Satanic Warmaster, Sargeist stuff. Not to disrespect those bands, which are definitely kind of like the keystone of defining so-called Finnish black metal sound. But True Black Dawn's value, in my opinion, or to my eyes, is anyway that they don't sound your typical Finnish black metal band. It's almost like a little bit vague in the sense that it's not your typical, Norwegian band or Swedish band or Finnish band, but it has this Nordic touch to it. Or in a way you could say it's very global sound in the sense of being traditional second wave black metal, being very dark and having this satanic sinister feeling and cool captivating melodies and all, and then again good production, good vocals, and just all, which makes True Black Dawn in my eyes one of the best black metal band to ever come from Finland. And I think they are overall a little bit like overlooked way too often. I think they don't have the respect and fame they could have. This is, I guess, a big part because they don't play that much gigs. So if you compare this to bigger bands that are always on tour or often on tour, do a lot of gigs and all that stuff, True Black Dawn is like one of those bands that just pop up every now and then, and you should totally see them live when you can, because it's not like given that you get to see them every year or anything like that. It's a shame, really, because, it's only 3 albums within more than 30 years, but at least the quality is right there, and I think it's a really, really good band coming from Finland. Then we move on to totally different, but roughly the same era early on. I mean, if you take a look at here, True Black Dawn's first releases, 93, 96, that's exactly what is probably the most cult band of them all, called Azazel. There are plenty of bands with the same name, but this Finnish black metal band is probably the most cultic of them all. Why? Well, a lot of people in the black metal scene already know how drunken Azazel can be both on stage and off stage. And that is big part to thank the Mr. Vocalist, Lord Satanakia, who has been there in the band since very early on. Now, originally he did also, he also did drums, but he has been the vocalist and the front of the band ever since. Now, if you already saw what I was clicking here for the past members tab, this is quite a list, given that this is also a band that didn't start recording albums until 2010s. So you have had a lot of changes, a lot of short-time members in the band, But the original people, like they're like two dead people. So very, very tragic story in that sense. Now, current lineup, if you take a look at it, is very, very much modern. There is like guitarist from 2011 and onwards. Same thing for drummer, 2012 onwards, and later on, Raakalainen joint guitarist 2017, and bass by, Lucifer in 2018. Now, this is to kind of point you out that the whole lineup has changed a lot over the years. But if you look at these first three members here, including Idimu, the drummer, and then go for discography, you will quickly find out that, okay, 2012 started their, album recording career. So it's like a restart for the band in that sense. But they were already a cult band in the 90s. Like, I have this weird memory in my head from the late 90s, can't really say which year, but it's roughly 98, give or take. And I remember Lauri from Satanic Warmaster and Horna back then, he was like, hey, Lord Satanak here, let's go greet him and all that stuff. This was outside a venue where we're going for a black metal gig. And I had no idea who Lord Satanak or what Azazel would be back in 1998. After all, they were very much an underground band with demo EP and that's it. Now, as things changed, probably a lot of people would feel this band was gone because nothing happened after the EP until 2011 split with Goatmoon. A very different band, but black metal underground nonetheless. And that, I guess, in a way sparked this whole thing going on with now 4 albums. And if you take a look at it, they have been quite active. 2012, the debut one, 2015, only 3 years after the second one. Then was a little bit bigger gap with 6 years for Agrum Satanas Tecum, which I think is the best Azazel album. And then finally this year, just a few weeks prior to making this video I got for this latest album of Dominus Luciferi, which is 2025 release. Now the curious thing is, Azazel is mostly known for kind of a simplistic, raw, mid-tempo black metal versus, more technical, more progressive, more symphonic, more melodic black metal, etc. In a way, there is some kind of a overlap with bands like Carpathian Forest. Both are very much in substance abuse every now and then, and they have these twisted mid-tempo black metal thing going on, which I think is good. I mean, all the Azazel album are, at least to some level, quite good, or even better. There are no weaklings, but the earlier stuff like, if I remember, Night of Satanakia, it's not that great, or the early demo, I mean, they are the products of their time, so obviously it's a little bit different story than making albums. But in my opinion, Azazel really started peaking when they finally moved on to album ones. And like I said, in my opinion, 2021 album is so far their best. Not to say that the other 3 are far behind. Overall, very solid band in that sense. Always entertaining live, even if it means the whole band is quite drunk and all. But it's a band that surely has, in my opinion, kind of a deserved their reputation, both good and bad. Bad in the sense that you sometimes don't know how the gig is gonna end, if the guys are gonna fall off the stage and all, creating unwarranted comedy, but also because the music is good. So it's an interesting band for sure, and I hope they keep going despite whatever talks there are online. And one thing that I really can respect with this kind of band is they don't really care. If there are people making accusations or laughing at them, Azazel still keeps going on. So, it's like the dogs barking at the, wagon line. So the caravan goes on and the dogs behind will leave barking. That's the story. Hail Azazel. And then finally moving to the last of the pile, which is also the newest band of the pile, Trollheims Grott from originally Kuopio, 1997 and onwards. Now, a lot of people can connect these bands nowadays to Horna because of these 2 brothers. Lauri, the drummer, also guitarist in the band, and as well Spelgot doing bass, vocals, guitars, keyboards. So always been this dynamic duo early on. However, there was also TG, a guy who also happens to play in True Black Dawn and Baptism Live, Bithus Live, so all that stuff. And with this stuff, the early years, the 2 brothers from 1990s made the music together. And later on it was complemented, like I mentioned, TH or BH, who was also part of, True Black Dawn, and other guitarist later on joining the fray. Past members is still there are few people, even one dead one, unfortunately. So as you can see, early on, the band changed. So while this always has been about this duo, there were other people as well. But I guess most credit goes to these two guys, the brothers, taking care of most of it. Or that's the feeling. If I'm wrong here, I'm sorry if I didn't give credit properly. But much like any other band, they started with demos. Like that was the thing back in the 90s, and I still think, in a way, old school ways, it should be the thing. So instead of just jumping to doing albums quickly, too hastily, and making the mistakes on the album, they demoed. They made quite a few demo, and then, after a few years, but not too many years, they made this album called Bizarre Troll Technology. Now, as you might guess, this is a very much a early 2000s kind of a stuff with their music. And while it's black metal, it's what got this industrial black metal later thing here on Metal Archive site. Meaning they were probably redefining their style over the years, adding layers of industrial things. And I think they took a little bit that further with the second album, Blood-Soaked and Ill-Fated, only 2 years later. But it was given kinda that after this demoing, they had already figured out what they're doing. So instead of making these mistakes on their early albums, which is unfortunately way too common for a lot of bands these days, they made the first steps with the demos. If they made some errors, it's right there. But with the albums, already good. However, something happened over the years, and suddenly you have this 15 years break. Remember True Black Dawn now? With the second and third album aligned with The True Death, which is probably the best Trollheims Grott album so far. Now it's not so much industrial again, so maybe Circle is in a way complete. I do not know, but obviously the lineup is different. So if you think about it, what is mentioned here, it shows now the trio, which I mentioned earlier on. So it's a little bit different than, just brothers with other comrades doing the music. And after that, things have changed. But now if you really think about it, 2018, and now we're late 2025, nothing is really happening. This might be the pointer where you go back to members list. So what other bands they had? And you go for Spellgod. Okay, he plays in Chamber of Unlight, he plays in Horna, Untitled Chapter, Sargeist, SG7, his own project, Baptism even, and then some other projects. Same thing for Lauri the drummer. You have Bilhus, you have Chamber of Unlight, Death Chain, Forgotten Horror, Horna, etc., etc. No point for me listing, just kind of a pointing out that when you actually start listing bands, not saying, okay, he also has this one side project. And now you can pretty much figure out, these guys are very busy with the other bands. This is not like they are creative people, they are very creative people. But the thing is, you can only dedicate so much time in a one given band. And as such, it always puts Trollheims Grott into this awkward side project position or status. I mean, there are lots of artists who say, like, even if I have like 5 or 10 different bands, they're not side projects. But how many main bands you can really have? I mean, of course, if you have a harem of bands, you all treat them equally like wives, like visiting every person after 2 nights or whatever. I guess it's different. But let's be honest about it. No people can dedicate 100% to each and every band, because that's how percentage go. You might give 50 to this one, 10, 15 to that one, and then the others get fractions. That's what I'm getting also from Trollheims Grott. And this is not to disrespect the band. I mean, I get it. We all have different lives, especially if you have like very active bands like Horna. It's hard to have all those other bands equally active when it comes to touring or writing new music or just whatever. And, Horna is not the only one that is very active. Sargeist is right there also. So there's that. This also sparks a term that comes to my mind every now and then. We're talking about Rytköskår. And Rytkönen is a surname of these two brothers. So Rytköskår sometimes refers to these bands, kind of jokingly, but in good manner, when these two brothers are involved. And this not just only applies to Trollheims Grott, but also those other bands where both of the brothers are involved. I don't know how much they smile or laugh about this given name, but it's just something that pops up every now and then. And when you think about it, it's quite fitting, because it's almost like its own sub-scene of things. Like you have black metal scene, and then you have Finnish black metal scene, and then you have rytköskorsiin. I don't know if it makes sense, but it's sometimes funny to connect all these dots and see how small the Finnish black metal scene is. It even amuses me, even though I've been part of the whole thing ever since like late 90s or whatever. So this is kind of to show you a little bit how small the Finnish black metal scene is, how connected it is, and how few key people are actually making most of the good bands. Now, talking about Trollheims Grott's music in terms of quality is also something that I can say about the two other bands. All the albums are good. In my opinion, however, they have gotten better over the years, so that in that sense the story is not too far from True Black Dawns, or Azazel for that matter. What really connects these three different bands together is that they have all matured very nicely. So like I said about Trollheims Grott, their latest album is their best in my opinion. With Azazel Case is the second newest album. With True Black Dawn, I think of these two latest albums equally good. So if you really think about it, True Black Dawn made the best material of their career about 30 years later. Or at least one of the two better ones. Azazel did their best stuff almost 30 years later. With Trollheims Grott, well, I'm not going to repeat it here, but you get the idea. 20 years later. So, it's cool to see that, sometimes when you think about the whole black metal thing, you say a lot of these classic albums, especially from, Norway, in a way, from Greece or Sweden too, a lot of these classic albums were made by teenagers. Which makes you think about it, okay, when guys hit their 40s, not to mention 50s, why would you bother to go with these bands if all the good stuff were made by teenagers? And then I present you these kind of bands and show, maybe you're wrong. Maybe there is actually something really good coming out from guys who are in their 40s or even 50s. So, yeah, if you have missed all these bands so far, if you have only heard the name or whatever, now it's good time to fix that. Because all these bands, like I mentioned, I'm repeating myself here, are really good ones. So, what are you waiting for? Start clicking. I will include these Metal Archive sites in the description box, and then you can find out related links, like to the social media, Bandcamp, whatever, or you can just go for streaming services and find about their music. And as always, if you like it, go buy it. And one thing worth mentioning is before we go is Trollheims Grott and True Black Dawn are not that active band in terms of live. So when you have the chance, don't wait for the next one because it might take for years. Azazel, a little bit more active, at least in Finland. So that's also something that you probably should consider seeing live once you have the possibility. These are not the Iron Maidens that tour the world all around all the time. So, like I said, when the chance presents itself, take it. Now off you go and enjoy some good black metal.